been a while. I'm sorry. Life happened. And I think I'm going to make a post at some point soon about that topic. How to be a doula when your life is going through a lot of stuff and turmoil and change and all of those things, and how do you keep doing the work. Actually, I know there's an international doula out right now, International Doula Magazine by Donna, that's out right now, and there is a beautiful soul who shared their experience of going through perinatal mood disorder, working as a doula, and how that impacted their life. And it really sort of was a reminder to me that our work is so big and so important and so intense that really we kind of need to sometimes take a step back when we've got things going on in our personal lives. And of course we always prioritize our clients, but sometimes we need to take a step back, and sometimes there's some things that maybe we normally do and that we have less time for, like maybe our YouTube channel videos. Sorry. So here's what I want to talk about today. So I'm happy to be back. It is this beautiful day. I'm not using my green screen today because my new backyard is so much more pretty than my green screen. And while the weather, this fleetingly beautiful weather, which is going to end before we know it, I want to take advantage. So hopefully my doggy will comply and not start barking like crazy while I'm recording this video. What I want to talk about today is childbirth education. So as I think I mentioned before, I'm following a family along through the last 6 months of their pregnancy and into their birth and their first trimester postpartum. And one of the things that we talked about recently was childbirth education. And one of the things that I've noticed trending in my own work as a doula is my clients, fewer and fewer clients taking childbirth classes. And when I look at my revenue, and we're a pretty big organization, we teach a lot of classes, our childbirth education revenue has dropped really quite considerably over the last few years. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think the biggest reason for that is not that our classes aren't good, because I think our classes are kind of awesome, but it's really that a lot of the classes out there are lecture based and not super fun and not super awesome. And so what happens is people rely most on word of mouth, and if all their friends are going to a class that seems lame, then they're not going to be telling their friends to go to that same class, right? So it doesn't matter how awesome my classes are, is if all of the other people out there are saying childbirth classes weren't worth it. But they are worth it if they're good. So what I want to strongly recommend to all of the doulas out there listening is that you strongly encourage your clients to take a class, but make sure that you're sending them to the very best class that you know of, if it's not you teaching it yourself. And the reason for that is when we think of how much time most of us spend with our clients, it is not enough, right? Two things. Number one is it's not in our scope of practice to be teaching all kinds of medical things if we're not a childbirth educator, right? That's not in our doula scope of practice. And the second thing is, even if it is, even for me, if all of my doula clients, I gave them childbirth classes included in, as part of my package or something like that, or as an add-on. Even if I could do that, I spend at least 12 hours teaching childbirth classes, and I'm not going to spend that one-on-one with every client. And there's just so much value in a fun class that, builds, that has awesome group dynamic, and where people get to meet other people going through the same things as them and ask the same questions, or questions that maybe they didn't even think of. So I think it's so important for people to be attending childbirth classes, and I don't know what it's going to take for us to get back to that and to get more people going again, but I like to think that we're part of the solution, and I want to make sure that we're not part of the problem by our clients hiring us and thinking, oh, that's enough, I have a doula, because of course nothing is further from the truth. So what are the reasons that people take classes? I think number one is really to access information. And because people have access to information in so many different ways now, what we're seeing is people who don't always think that that's where they need to get information. And hey, I don't blame them. There's lots of places to get information. It would have to be pretty compelling for me to pay to get information from someone if I could get it for free online. But how do I need to get information? What is the best way for me to digest information? And that's a whole other story, right? And what we know is a really great class is going to teach in a way that's more effective to our actual learning. So that old I call it old, but the sort of that old theory around people being auditory or visual learners or kinesthetic learners, so touching, seeing, hearing. Actually, there's been some research to disprove that, right? And when we actually look at learning philosophies, really it's more that there is a certain way to teach certain topics that is going to be best for learning absorption and retention. And I think that's something that's really important for us as doulas too, is that we're not going to our prenatal visits just to have a chat and just discussion-based learning. I think it needs to be a lot more hands-on and activity-based than what many of us do. And you've probably seen that I've made lots of posts like that too. This isn't the first time I've talked about it. I talk all the time about different ways that we could be teaching things and going over things. I should say going over things rather than teaching, but ways to have a discussion with someone that's not just sort of that lecture discussion based, but in a way that people really remember what we're talking about. And that really helps us glean things, because it's a changing time. It's different than it was when, 75% of people were taking childbirth classes, probably 30 years ago. It's not the same anymore. People have access to information in different ways. And there is definitely some research on those topics. We look at the Listening to Mothers survey through Childbirth Connection, and that tells us a lot of different things around this topic. And that's a great place to go to, a great resource if you haven't already been going there. I would highly recommend that. The other thing that we know from the current generations of learners is that many of them are they have more reliance on information they get from peers than they get from other sources. So I think that's something that we need to consider as well. And I think that's why it's important that those of us that are teaching childbirth classes and those of us that are promoting childbirth classes, that we're promoting the right ones. Because like I said before, if the friends are saying don't bother, then people are less likely to do that. What we want to create a community where people are saying, yes, that was really valuable, that was worth my money, that was worth my time. And because of course there's something really different than a family spending dedicated time together, whether it's one day or 3 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it is, but spending time together to go and learn together. That's very different than the kind of information that either of them are going to gather and glean on their own by going online. So I think looking at types of classes and making sure that we're promoting classes that are appropriate for the target market that we're working with. And if you work with a lot of different families and different target markets, that we consider that we're recommending the right type of class for the right type of participant. So someone who's a super educated professional, they might be someone who's more into that evidence-based type of thing than someone who's planning a home birth and is really more focused on sort of that spiritual element of their birth experience. And then maybe a hypnobirthing class is more appropriate for that person. And I talk always about, us being a doula chameleon and making sure that the things that we talk about, the things that we're sharing, the conversations we're having, the things we're recommending, that they fit in line with the family that we're serving. That's really important. It is not one size fits all out there, as we know. It's not for us and it's not for them. So my suggestion for homework for this week for all of you is to make sure that you are familiar with all the different classes happening in your community and that you know which ones are best to recommend. And if you don't know, then how can you get that information? Do you need to chat with parents? Do you need to chat with other doulas? Do you need to ask to go and audit a class? I don't know. All of those things are really awesome options and ideas. So I'm going to give you that homework for this week. I will definitely see you next week. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Ciao.